The closer we get to October, the more the hype builds up for some of these big fall Nintendo Switch titles. In particular, Metroid Dread is going to be the focus of this video, and we're going to discuss how it's kind of shocking what it's doing right now. But before we get into any of that, what's up everyone, OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button and also subscribe if you are someone new for daily gaming videos and live streams. And also click that notification bell to get my videos first. Now let's talk about Metroid Dread and what's going on with this game. I've been covering the pre-order sales or the pre-sales of this game because I think that it's very important for the future of 2D Metroid. Now we already know that Metroid Prime 4 is a thing and Retro Studios is working on it, but Metroid Dread is something that's almost completely different in terms of gameplay and aspect. Now there's similarities between the two, but there's definitely somewhat of a divide between people who love 2D Metroid and people who love the 3D Metroid Prime games. Now I'm more on the boat of I like the 2D Metroid games where Samus is a lot faster and you have a little bit more crazier abilities and different things like that, just the pace and speed of the game. However, 2D Metroid hasn't necessarily done as well as some of the 3D outings, so it's very important that this game in particular, Metroid Dread, does well so we can see the future of the franchise continue on with 2D Metroid and also with 3D Metroid with Metroid Prime. So let's talk about what's going on with these sales so far. There has been some discussion, as many of you guys probably already know, on how this game is going to do based off of past titles, and many people feel that it's not going to do very well. But there is enough evidence, in my opinion, based on what I've been analyzing here for the past couple months to show that Metroid Dread is probably going to be the franchise's best seller with 3 million plus now that more information and data is being known and available to us. Now, we've already talked about other things. If you haven't checked out my previous videos discussing Metroid Dread sales, please make sure you check those out after this one. I talk about how it's launching with new hardware. I talk about how that hardware is kind of tuned with it with the whites and the aesthetic of Metroid Dread as well. I talked about the Switch effect, which we're going to get into with this video as well, but we have some more information on that. So I've discussed various different things with how Metroid Dread is probably going to do better than all of the previous Metroid games, but now more data has came out and it's in the form of GameStop, and there's actually a bit of a shocking list that they showed off because GameStop actually revealed the top 10 most pre-ordered games since June 8th. So right around that E3 time or so and afterwards. And would you believe that Metroid Dread is actually the top game on this list? And you guys are seeing it right here. That is above Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, the double pack. That is above Mario Party Superstars, Pokemon Legends Arceus, Shin Megami Tensei 5, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond, WarioWare Get It Together, Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, shout outs to Doki Doki boys and girls out there, Sonic Colors Ultimate, and Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. The fact that Metroid Dread is up there with the big boys of Pokemon and Mario is very impressive. And of course, a little side shout out, which we're going to talk about in a separate video, to Shin Megami Tensei 5, but to see Metroid Dread as number 1, I can't recall another time, which I wasn't necessarily covering sales beforehand, but I can't recall a time that Metroid ever topped pre-orders for anything when it comes down to it, because it's never been one of the biggest sellers for Nintendo. So to see Metroid Dread up there at the top, that is enough, combined with some of the other things that we're going to talk about, to clearly show that this game is going to do better than pretty much all of the previous 2D Metroid games at the bare minimum. But there's more to go along with that, because this is the first time that I can recall that a Metroid game is actually launching with new hardware. Just to let you guys know, when you have a big game with new hardware, it helps push that game's sales. I know that might be a little crazy to some people, or maybe you don't think about that, but yes, if you have a game and it launches with the hardware and you pair that together, it definitely helps boost the sales of that game further than what it would have been without that game launching with it, as people are buying that new hardware and want that shiny new game to go with their shiny new toy or piece of hardware. So Metroid Dread is definitely going to benefit from that. Now, if you move over to the Amazon sales, which I've been tracking for quite some time now, Metroid Dread is starting to pick back up as we get closer to it. Now, the top 10 games, here's what's going on the Amazon sales for the US. Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, it's still on its tear. You also have Madden that's starting to creep up, all the different versions of Madden across the Xbox and PlayStation. Mario Golf, it's still doing its thing. Hades just came out, that's doing very well for $30. But right after that is Metroid Dread. So right there, in terms of just pure games, it's in the top 5. And it's going to keep going up as we get closer. I think it's going to take that #1 spot around the time of its launch. So you combine the GameStop pre-orders, it being #1, over games like Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and yes, those games will probably overtake it later or whatever the case is, or those games are going to sell more. We know that Mario Party, we know that Pokemon are going to sell more with the casual consumers, and just because it's just a bigger game overall holiday season. But to see Metroid up there is impressive, and it's something that we probably haven't seen before for any of the previous Metroid games when it comes to pre-orders and all of that. So that's very impressive in my opinion. And then to combine that with this Amazon sales news, to see that people are pre-ordering on Amazon, one of the largest, if not the largest retailer for video games here in the US, especially with the pandemic and everything, that to me shows that there are plenty, and I mean plenty, of old fans and new fans that are going to hop on this one, or you wouldn't be getting these sales results, guys. I'm pretty sure, based on every single game that I've talked about so far, when I see it doing well in pre-orders at retailers, the sources that I have, when I see it doing well in the pre-orders on Amazon, it always ends up doing pretty well overall, or setting a franchise record. That's just something that's happened over and over and over when it comes to me analyzing the different game sales that we've seen so far, which is exactly why I was saying that The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD is going to do incredibly well when people were saying, oh, well, we're not sure how it's going to sell, $60, even though it's cheaper, but whatever. I was like, no, it's probably going to do extremely well regardless of the fact, just because I was seeing what it was tracking, the pre-order numbers were starting to come in, and it was looking very good. So while it's not as high as The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword with Metroid Dread, it's still charting very well, and there is a legitimate amount of hype surrounding this Metroid game over other ones. And I've seen countless people say, hey, this is going to be my first Metroid game. This is my first Metroid game. I can't wait to hop into it. The game looks really good. Looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's exactly what I want to see with it. Now, one of the last things that I want to talk about here to kind of go with the shock is that if you look, Monster Hunter Stories 2, that game has benefited so much from the Switch effect and of course the install base of the Switch. We got from the MPD recently that Monster Hunter Stories 2 has already sold 3 times the amount of Monster Hunter Stories on the Nintendo 3DS here in the US alone. 3 times the amount. Yes, Monster Hunter is definitely more popular now at this point than it was back in like 2016 or 2017, back when that first Monster Hunter game did come out. But the fact that it did that much better, not like, oh, it did like a couple hundred units better, a couple thousand units, it did 3 times as much in a fraction of the time, with the Nintendo 3DS still having a somewhat decent install base, a sizable base. That just goes to show you that the Switch effect is definitely real, and it can help all sorts of games. So using games sales from the Nintendo 3DS to try to prove a point about the Nintendo Switch doesn't actually transfer over, because almost every single 3DS franchise that has came over to the Nintendo Switch, so whether it's Fire Emblem or Pokemon or Bravely Default or any of these other games, they have all done better or franchise best on the Nintendo Switch. And there's nothing that's indicating from what I've seen so far that Metroid Dread can't have that same effect within the Metroid franchise on the Nintendo Switch. I think the writing is on the wall at this point, but I wanted to give you guys that information and also go in depth and kind of look at the actual analytical side of it when you start comparing everything, and it shows that yes, that interest is there, and I'm excited for it. I'm excited for the Metroid franchise. I'm excited to play the game. I'm excited for new people to hop in. This is exactly what gaming is about, is building that community, whether it's as big as Pokemon or as big as some of the other games, or it's not as big. It's all about the experiences and what people are playing, what people enjoy, and I think that Metroid Dread is going to get a lot more fans onto the boat because of the Nintendo Switch system, because of the new style of marketing, because of how things have just changed and progressed from the last time that we actually got a brand new 2D Metroid game. Heck, it's arguable that even from when Nintendo released Samus Returns, things are completely different. I know from my side, from covering video games and what Nintendo and how they acted from 2017 and the copyright claims compared to not at this point, it's night and day. And I think the marketing cycle and what's happening right now is night and day. The 3DS sales, game sales, and what was the high number of sales compared to the Switch, which is way higher, that's night and day. Switch is blowing 3DS out of the water in pacing of sales and also video game sales. So everything is completely different from those days. So I think that it's going to be more of what's going on now recently with the games that are coming out. But we're going to have to wait and see on that. What do you guys think about this? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this one here. Check out the links in the description. I've got a Twitter page. Go ahead and give me a follow on there. Stay up to date on all latest gaming news and information, and also when we go live. And also, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video if you can. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.